Thomas Anderson.
Hello, Chelsea.
You are a director of product management here at Pagero, part of Thomson Reuters.
Indeed.
Today, we're going to tackle a subject that is exciting for some, terrifying for others, and that is change.
Change.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you feel about change as a concept? For, against?
I was talking with my partner a few weeks ago. We have had the roads have changed near where we live. Like some of them have changed direction. She hates it, and I don't care at all. It's fine. It's happened. I can't change it. It's happened. So I think I'm quite accepting of change.
Okay.
I also, in some instances, are quite into change. I wouldn't say I'm the first adopter of technology, but I am in favour of technology. I guess I have to be working for a tech business. So I think, change is generally good. I think it's generally something that you have to accept. It's going to happen. It's generally for a good reason. Progress comes with change. So I'd say all in favour of it.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And an organization. So on the subject of organizational change. Is it something that should be happening all the time in phases? Like, what is your opinion when it comes to organizational transformation?
I think, again, it has to happen. I think if you look at digital transformation, look at businesses that are kind of more digitally savvy, they tend to have higher revenues. They tend to deliver more shareholder value. So, you should be looking at change in your organization. It's 2025. You can't be doing the things that you were doing in 2000 or 2004 when I started work.
But it's the same millennium. You would think that some of the things would just carry over, no?
Some things have carried over. Yeah, we still do most of our work on a laptop now, I guess. But I guess before I started work, it was a desktop. So some things have carried over. But other things have changed. Look at what we're doing with AI, with LLMs, with GPTs. Lots of changes coming. I know that's not really the topic for today. We're going to talk about e-invoicing.
Yes.
But that's changing. Lots of changes has happened in e-invoicing. When I started in 2004, I'm going to show my age a little bit. E-invoicing was not driven by tax. It was driven by automation, or the need for automation. It was driven by accounts receivable and accounts payable. And that's not so much the case anymore. Things have changed. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And what exactly has changed from then to now?
Who is driving the change for e-invoicing? I think it's more now a tax-driven process, perhaps driven more by governments and their need to mandate e-invoicing or e-reporting. But it's still something that is impacting businesses. It's still something that if businesses take advantage of the change, where they can drive benefit, and that's something that hasn't changed. It's a deliverer of benefit to various parts of the business. It's just because it's driven by a different department, perhaps now than what it would have been 20 years ago, 25 years ago. 25 is really hard to say. 25 years ago when I started, the benefits are still broadly the same. And I think what's shocking to me sometimes as someone who is generally in favour of changes, that businesses are still starting on this journey now in 2025, not 2000.
Yeah. So do you think we're much further behind in e-invoicing adoption than you expected when you started?
Still. I think there has been probably more progress in the last couple of years, let's say maybe the last 5 or 6 years, than there had been in the 20 years before that, or whatever it was, 16 years before that. So I think it's coming. It's very much of the now. It's going to be very much of our future still. But for the first couple of years, first 15 years, it's slow. Let's say it was slow.
Why? What is the source of resistance? Is it nonchalance or is it actually resistance?
I think there's an element if it's not broke, then why fix it? Why try to change it? Organizations had already invested in kind of other technologies, so investing in OCR to read invoices or read other document types. Perhaps then there's a resistance to change, something that you've already invested in. What's it, the psychology of sunken costs or something like that. So I think that was an element of it. I think without the push from governments, it was something that the business had to take on themselves. You have to find a business case. You have competing priorities. It was a huge change process. You had to onboard your suppliers to what were quite often closed networks. And that was a large effort. I think now some of that, or a lot of that, has been removed through the encouragement that governments are giving. You've got to do it in many instances. So yeah, I think that's bringing about a lot of progress in the last, as I say, 5-6 years.
Yeah. And okay, I'm going to accompany this question with an anecdote. So the question is, what are the processes and things that should be changed around e-invoicing? So when you're considering adopting this, what other aspects of your business should you take a look at? And my anecdote is, so I have a weird rule for myself.
Okay.
Which is when I buy a new piece of clothing, it's not allowed to enter my closet until I've fully reorganized my closet. So like closed out, clean it, close back in, stuff donated. So that when the new piece of clothing comes in, I feel like its benefit to me and the happiness that it gives me is doubled or even tripled.
Okay.
Because now it's part of like an organized, well thought out system.
Okay.
Would you say
you're going to need to repeat the question again because I'm just lost in that anecdote. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So do you think a lot of organizations are thinking about just adding e-invoicing, especially if they're motivated by mandates? It's like, okay, this is a technology we need to adopt, and it kind of gets added into their chaos rather than being an invitation to transformation.
Okay, no, I like that. I think there is a huge element of that. And I think in the past, let's think kind of before many governments were mandating it, it was something that the business controlled themselves. They were able to look at their processes, look at where they perhaps had gaps or areas for improvement. They could take their time and they could tackle what was important to them, whether maybe they needed to improve their working capital, maybe taking advantage of early payment discounts was important to that. So therefore, getting the invoice in more quickly, not going through post or email, but coming in as data, that data comparing or matching to what was in the purchase order, so what they'd spent or the contract that they were planning to spend against, meant that they were able to approve the invoice more quickly, and then they could take advantage of an early payment discount, which improves your working capital. Maybe you were a supplier and you had issues with your days sales outstanding. You wanted to reduce it. If your invoice is pre-validated against your customer's requirements, it's going to be approved more quickly. Therefore, you get paid when you expect to be paid. Your treasury can manage their cash, their funds. Where there is a mandate, you kind of lose or you can lose or feel like you've lost the ability to take a step back and think about what's important to you. There are tight deadlines often. The requirements change frequently, and I listened to your episode with Nazar, and he touched on some of that. You lose the control, you feel like you lose the control, and you can be caught in quite a reactionary phase. So you don't get a chance to kind of get your cards in order. You say wardrobe, get your cards in order, take a stock of what's important to you. I think that is a huge change, and I think it's something that many customers, including our own, are struggling to deal with, and it's something that service providers or good service providers can support them with.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest reasons that we authored this e-invoicing transformation playbook. Because we do, in many ways, wanted to sound the alarm that mandates are now coming. Like, we've been talking about them for a long time. But now with VIDA being ratified, it's all coming, and you do want time for transformation. So going back to my example, I'm wearing very nice socks today.
Okay,
they're rainbow. You can check them out later.
I'll check them later.
And it took me a few months before I could get to my closet reorganization and sort the socks, because I didn't want to just throw them into the chaos.
I don't keep my socks in my wardrobe. I keep them in a little drawer next to the bed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're all different that way. But so you need transformation just takes time. Sometimes you have, or a lot of times you have other priorities, business priorities you need to get to. So you need to plan in when you're going to get to that transformation. The transformation itself takes time and a lot of energy. So we want to wave this flag where businesses like, okay, start preparing now. So we authored this very extensive report, very long.
It was very long. Yeah.
To follow these scenarios of transformation to their logical conclusion. So if you're getting started, you know, like, okay, what does it look like to start a transformation on the right foot? So in the first scenario, there's a business that is surprised by mandates. Like, oh, mandate is on the doorstep. They go into reactionary mode. So can you talk a little bit about how it goes for businesses when the only motivation is a government saying you need to start e-invoicing and direct reporting?
That's the position that many businesses are in or have found themselves in the last couple of years. Maybe multinationals have gone past that stage now, but if you're operating in a single country, you've not had to worry about it. You now have to worry about it. And we need to be clear, it's the law that changes. It's not a choice. It's not a nice to have. You can do it if you want to, but if you don't, then that's fine. You have to do it. You have to do it by a certain time frame, and you have to do it in this very prescribed way, which might change as you're halfway through. So, or worse, 90% through. So there is, many businesses in that position. I guess it's difficult because you don't know you're going to be in that position perhaps until you're there. So hence we put the paper together. It is coming. If you're not impacted now, you will be impacted. Why you are impacted might differ. How you are impacted might differ, but it's coming, and it's coming. If we take a step back, it's coming because of the benefits to the government in the country where you're operating. Regardless of the country you're in or the territorial region you're in, there is a need for governments and tax authorities to collect revenue, and their revenue is tax. And regardless of which country you're in, there is a gap between what should be collected and what is being collected. Some of that might be fraud, probably is. Some of it will just be genuine, honest mistakes. People don't know what they need to do, or businesses don't know what they need to do in terms of tax submissions and reclaims. And e-invoicing and e-reporting has been proven in the countries where it's deployed to increase the government's ability to collect their revenues. And other countries have seen that, and they're silly if they don't do it. Why would you not do it?
More money on the table.
Yeah, but it is money, and it's super important. We should all pay our taxes. Taxes fund schools and hospitals, and there's obviously lots of conflict in the world at the moment. They fund that. Maybe that doesn't make the cut. Maybe I'm not in favour of war, obviously. But it's funding hospitals, it's funding schools, and tax should be collected, because if it's not, then we all are at a detriment. So it's coming to the country where you operate. I'm from the UK, if you know that, but maybe those listening have picked it up from my accent. We don't have an e-invoicing mandate yet in the UK, but it's coming. And it will be SMBs who are most impacted and hopefully most benefit from it as well. Most are going to be reacting. I think what's important, even if it's reacting, is still being able to take a pause and a step back and understanding that, yes, you must do this, and there's a reason for doing it that the government is prescribing. Maybe those reasons are different. They're probably all related to tax collection. For the government. That's why e-invoicing and e-reporting gives greater visibility to the government as to what taxes should be collected. They have greater insight into the business that's being done in their country. So they would be the drivers. But for you as a business, still try and take a step back and understand, yes, I have to do this. I have to comply with the law, but how can I benefit from it as a business. Digitization creates automation, and automation creates efficiency. Maybe it creates cost savings. So take advantage. Don't just jump into something because you have to do it quickly. And it's really, really difficult because the deadlines are deadlines. They're not, if you make this date, that's great. If you don't, then cool, you've got a little bit longer. The deadline's the deadline. The requirements are the requirements. But still, do what you can do. And there's lots that you can do to ensure that you select the right provider that supports your processes and that enables you to do more than just comply with the law.
Yeah. And would you say C-suite leaders are very important in this change? Like, do they need to be like leaders, really like take ownership for this and make sure the right cross-sectional teams get assembled?
Whether it's a C-suite or their reports, it needs leadership, and it needs the right level of leadership from the right people. It's a change. Digital transformation, regardless of what you're trying to transform, or regardless of the change you're trying to make, always needs the right leadership. If it doesn't have the right leadership, if it doesn't have the right sponsorship, it doesn't work. And that's not specific to what we're talking about. That's just anything. Even at home, if you don't agree on things with your partner, you don't do things together, you're working to the same objective, it's not going to get done, is it? So it's the same at work. Make sure you've got the right sponsorship from the right individuals, and it's probably quite a broad group of individuals as well. Make sure they're supportive, make sure there's budget, make sure there's time, because whilst this is technology, it's actually a people change. So make sure there's time for people to dedicate to this.
Yeah. Scenario number 2 in the report goes into sunk costs. And the scenario is this company has actually already invested in automation. So maybe they were somewhat early to that thought. So they have an automation solution in place, a well-oiled machine, but it's not compliant. Maybe they neglected to take that into account. They didn't have the right, all the stakeholders that they needed at the point that they were making their investments. Does this company bolt on compliance solutions, or do they need to abandon their sunk costs in their automation technology and choose a different service provider that blends automation and compliance? Tricky one. This is rough. Sunk costs are rough.
The fallacy of sunken costs. Yeah. The short answer is pull the plaster, as I would say, the band-aid, I guess, as you would say.
Yes.
Pull it off as quickly as possible if you need to make a change. That's the short answer. I think the long answer. I started approaching e-invoicing as an enabler of automation. It was there to improve the quality of data. It was there to enable invoices to be processed automatically so that you could manage exceptions. You could increase your efficiency, you could reduce your cost, you can increase your working capital, blah, blah, blah. And businesses have done that perhaps with other e-invoicing solutions. In the past, many e-invoicing solutions were on closed networks, meaning that there were the vendor, the supplier, and the buyer were using the same service provider, meaning that service provider could put lots of rules and checks and balances in place that would enable only the flow of good invoices or orders or shipping information. That's changed, really. So probably now not the closed model probably doesn't really work. If you have to issue all of your invoices electronically, if you have to receive all of your invoices electronically, you can't now use this provider for this relationship, this provider for another relationship. You're going to choose your one and only, and your trading partners are going to choose their ones and only, and therefore those partners need to interoperate. It means that those checks and balances are more difficult to manage. So the automation changes. Automation is a nice to have. It's something that you should have. It's 2025. Yeah, this is going out 2025, not 2026. I can say 2026. Yep. Yeah. This is automation's a nice to have. Compliance is a must have. You can't not be compliant. You can, but you're going to get fined. Some countries, your CFO might go to prison. So it's a not. Yeah, compliance is a must-have. If your automation solution or your ERP doesn't enable you to comply with legislation, it's probably not fit for purpose. I don't like the idea of bolt-ons, because you'll put one bolt-on and another bolt-on and another bolt-on, and then things won't work correctly. They won't support your process. There'll be bits of data in one system, bits of data in another system. It's going to be a pain to make sense of anything. Separate to or different to bolt-ons, there are good integrations. So there are ERPs that have solutions that are truly integrated into them, workflows that are truly have solutions like our own integrated into them. And I'd see that as different to a bolt-on, because whilst various technologies are making use of their partner technologies, the data is still centralized. It is a smooth process for you as a customer, for you as the user. It is a seamless experience. So yeah, I think that's an option, or choosing buying directly, if you like, from the service provider is another option. But again, making sure that the technologies work together.
Yeah.
There isn't one technology that does everything for anything. If it's HR, you've probably got a HR specific system and your ERP, and they'll each store bits of data and they should talk seamlessly. Your car manufacturer probably didn't create the stereo, maybe didn't create the gearbox or something else. I have to confess to not being overly familiar with cars, but they work seamlessly together. I think that's what you've got to aim for with this type of thing too.
Do you experience that some companies are like, oh, e-invoicing, our ERP does that, but then they don't realize that it's not hooked up as an e-invoice to nowhere?
Yeah, we did a survey recently where we were looking at where prospects or customers first look for their solutions. Do they look at their ERP? Do they look at other providers? Providers directly? Are they looking at finding providers within other bits of software like accounts payable or accounts receivable automators? And the ERP is the first place they look. It's not to say it's the right place to look, but it's the first place they look. And that kind of makes sense. You operate in your ERP all day. It's your system of record. It already has integrations perhaps into tax solutions. Possibly doesn't provide the tax solution themselves, but it has the integration. And therefore you would look there. That's not to say, it's the right place to look. In some instances, it can be.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to scenario number 3. I've named it, not in the playbook itself, but here.
Yeah.
Fragmentation station.
Okay, nice.
Fraggle Rock.
I remember Fraggle Rock. I'm old enough to remember Fraggle Rock, and the theme tune was one of my favorites. Yeah, there's a punk rock cover of Fraggle Rock theme tune. But,
oh, really?
Yeah.
But like Fraggle Rock, so this scenario is about a international compliance structure that is like a very complex cave system built up organically over years, and you spend a lot of time building up this local compliance structure. So
like
if you want to, yes. Yeah. If you want to be compliant in Italy, you have a compliance provider there. In Singapore, there. So you have all these local providers, but that starts to create fragmentation.
Okay, yeah. You nearly joined in then. I thought you were going to sing the tune. No.
So what happens is oversight naturally becomes low from a central perspective.
Yeah.
So what does this kind of company do? And this will be a really big multinational. Do they double down on their investments to try to really double make sure that they're compliant everywhere, and where new mandates are popping up, get a new compliance vendor, push harder with their shared service centers? Or do they make a big change and aim to centralize compliance?
Where does I did a webinar with a customer in the last couple of weeks. I don't know if we can name names. They're a big producer of movies, big entertainment studio. And they talked on that webinar about effectively the same situation. They operate in multiple countries around the world. The mandates were impacting them at various stages. They were kind of in the first scenario where we talked about being reactionary. So the first country, they reacted. and they implemented a solution, it met the requirements, and excellent, we can still continue to operate. The second country, okay, well, that worked, so we'll do the same thing. We can't use the same provider because we chose one that was very specific to that country, but we'll choose another provider and that works, it's fine. And then the third one and the fourth one and the fifth one come at the same time. Oof. And you can either continue with that process, it's kind of worked, you're always going to get budget for it because it's compliance, you can't not comply. Fortunately, they took a step back. I talked about the importance of doing that. They took the step back, they looked kind of wider and further. What is the trend, or what are the trends? They see that more and more countries are going down this route. They saw that countries even that they weren't operating in had already gone down this route. And their conclusion was, let's look for something that is more holistic, that can support us as far and wide as possible, for many reasons. One, I guess, whilst you have the pain of going back on what you've already purchased and implemented, purchasing as a single solution that can support you far and wide has benefits around the relationship you have with the vendor. It's easier to manage one relationship than it is to manage 100 plus, however many countries now have mandates. With one vendor, you can actually create a strategy together. You can create good common ways of working and actually build that relationship. Your data, importantly, is in a centralized position or centralized place. So you have access to that data, you can mine that data, you can use that data for other things. You move from just complying with the law to actually benefiting from it yourself. So that's the approach that they took. It's obviously something we're supporting them with.
And could you clarify for people that might not be aware of like how you can do global compliance but be complying locally at the same time? How does that work?
There is no global compliance.
Yeah.
That's easy. So that's the easy thing. Every country is different. There are differences sometimes depending on the size of your organization. You still have to do something, but maybe when it impacts you changes. Yes, there is no global one size fits all. Even if the approaches are similar, even if countries have implemented something like PEPL, maybe they're doing that for business to government invoicing, but not yet business to business. So you have a different process to support. Maybe one country has implemented PEPL in a slightly different way to another country. For you as the business, you have to support each of those differences. So you have a choice. Again, work with individuals who are specific or individual providers who are specific, or you work with a larger provider who doesn't have a global solution. They have a solution that they can provide globally that meets the local solutions.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so in the beginning of these scenarios, mm-hmm. they diverge into two pathways. And one is the bad pathway, mm-hmm. where the stress for time, they don't take that step back. Yeah. And the other pathway where they do. Mm-hmm. And across all the scenarios, they tend to pivot kind of at the same point, which is around the team that is involved.
Yeah.
So can you give some pointers about who should be involved when it comes to invoicing transformation?
Yeah, it's a good question. And probably the most important thing to consider. An invoice, and therefore by extension an e-invoice, kind of affects multiple teams. It is a tax document, yes, and if we're talking specifically around mandates, the impetus from the government is around the tax that's on the invoice. But it's also a document that tells you what you have been buying. A purchase order tells you what you intend to buy. The invoice is what you have bought. So there's important information on it, on an invoice related to that. It is, if you're a supplier, it's your formal request, official request to be paid. You've provided your goods and services. Now, as per the contract, I want to be paid within however many days we've agreed. If you're the buyer of the goods and services, it's you accepting or acknowledging that, yes, these have been bought, everything is satisfactory, the goods have been delivered, the services are delivered, I will now pay you for those services you've provided. For Treasury, it's impacting the cash flow of the organisation. Am I going to get paid to terms? For payables, for Treasury, it's am I paying the right supplier at the right time for the right thing? So whereas today it's perhaps e-invoicing mandates are perhaps hitting tax first of all, it isn't just a tax project. It needs to include multiple stakeholders. And that's to your question earlier around kind of should the C-suite be supporting? Yeah, you need senior stakeholders, but then also stakeholders kind of more on the ground. So yeah, your heads of payables and receivables, treasury, tax, procurement even. These are relationships with your vendors. You need to ensure that they're still getting paid to time. So yeah, it needs multiple teams. It needs to be managed as any other change project or change process. You need to look at the objectives first of all, look at the current processes of those teams. How will this impact those processes? What do I want to achieve? Tax needs to comply with the law. Payables might want to see this as an opportunity to take advantage of early payment discounts because they should be approving their invoices more quickly. You should be looking at then who is the right provider. Maybe you bring in technology at that point because you have technology procurement policies as well. You should be looking at how it's going to impact your workforce. If you have staff who are used to managing one process today with one technology, it's going to change. It's going to have to change. So make sure they're aware of what's happening. Make sure they're trained on what you're providing to them. Then look at, I guess, monitoring what you've done. Have you made the right decision? Just because you've made the decision doesn't mean it's right going forward. So monitor, what can you improve? What can you optimize? So yeah, standard change process.
So would you say that organizations should not fear this change? Or rather, that they should be excited for this change? It is the invitation to transformation that will help them
I like
in
that.
the long run.
I like that, the invitation to transformation. Yeah. That's why you're a wordsmith. I think they should see it like that. In the past, if you wanted to optimize or improve departments within the business, you would need a business case. You would need to compete against other initiatives. You'd need to gather the stakeholders and get them to be supportive of what you're trying to achieve. Some of that goes away. Obviously, the need to have the stakeholders aligned and whatnot stays, but this is a perfect opportunity. You have to make the change anyway, so use that as your impetus. Yeah.
Any other hot takes that you would recommend when it comes to going about this particular change?
I can give you some quotes. I can give you the only constant is change.
Thank you. I have not heard that one before.
Have you not heard that one before? That was some Greek philosopher.
What else do you got?
We have JFK has a quote around change. Something along the lines of those that only look to the past and the present will not take advantage of the future. That's a really misquoted quote from JFK. There's another one from someone, which is the snake or the reptile that does not shed its skin, meaning doesn't change, will die.
Will die?
Yeah, it's die or will be killed. Yeah. Oh. So there's a few hot takes in terms of quotes.
Just very hot takes.
Hot takes from the 1960s and before.
Yes.
Change shouldn't be feared. Whether it's my partner having to get used to the roads being in a slightly different layout at home. It's happened. Some change you have to just accept and get on with it. It's out of your control. Other change you can initiate yourself, and you should. Yeah, I do absolutely encourage that. But where change is out of your control, how can you use that best to your advantage? And I think for e-invoicing, it's the perfect opportunity for many organizations to take that step into the future, if you like, to use JFK. and to look at how they can improve their own processes and not just comply with the law.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.